So you were continuing and saying what?
So yeah, I was just talking about the dilemma of conversation. Just so much to talk about,
Yeah.
and I watched your other interviews just so that I could have more insight into you and your background. And
Do you want to start by saying who he is first? Hey,
well,
we're
so
meeting with.
yeah,
Doug
let's go.
Fiefia. Yeah. Yeah. I'm happy to be here and thank you for inviting me. And I'm excited to jump into civics and politics. And I think the ability that we have as Polynesians, as Utahns, to get involved and make a difference. Because I think as I've done podcasts and I met with people, there's so many people who don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And
Oh
I
yeah.
love that I've
Yeah.
seen you guys and your guys' posts being up at the Capitol during this legislative session and voicing your opinions and interviewing people. Um, it doesn't take that much. People are like, man, they must know people. They must have these meetings set up. They must have all these things scheduled. But the reality is, you can just show up.
Yeah.
You can go and say, how do I contact my representative? And they're like, hey, who's your representative? Look it up. Okay, this person. They give you a link. You can text them, text their intern to come out. You
Mm-hmm.
can send them an email. And the reality is, those little things make a difference. They're reviewing thousands of bills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you have something that you're passionate about, it just takes that little bit to say, hey, this is what I'm going through. This is how I view it from my lens. And so I'm for it or against it.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
those little things make a huge
Well,
difference when they're
and I
voting.
love that because to me, civics is the little things, and really the reason why we wanted to do this Polytic podcast, emphasis on poly, because I just feel we're so disconnected. Like our community is so disconnected with civic engagement, which is so ironic to me because we come from cultures where there's protocols everywhere. Like everybody has a role, to the oldest brother, to the youngest brother, to the auntie, to the uncle. Like we have roles that have been delegated, passed down for generations, and it's just been so frustrating for me because I don't know how to connect the languages, and so I try to speak to the heart of it, and that throws political people off because they're like, why are you talking about the small and simple things? I'm like, because that's where governance begins.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit frustrating for me. But anyways, to begin with, I know you wanted to start off with the first
Yes.
question.
My favorite question. Are we related? How much I can see.
I'm sure
I just want to see if
we
we are
must.
related.
Are you looking your family
Yes, we're
search?
looking up on
I
family
feel like
tree.
this is embarrassing that we have to go to the family tree. We need like our auntie or an uncle who has the genealogy be like, this is how you related. Your grandfather, your
Well, I just
grandma.
want to know if we're related. So you know that she and I are sisters, right?
Yes. Yep.
How do you? Oh, so
So
just look for.
your parents came
Are you
here.
are you active? I'm like, are you on right now so I can
This
find
is a
out?
brand new phone. So I am
A
actually
brand
downloading
new
it. It
phone.
is
How do you
brand
like
new.
it?
It's good. I just needed it. I, I'm the type of person that I stick with it until it dies.
Yeah.
And my last phone was dying. And with as many texts and calls and emails that I'm now doing with the campaign, it's like I can't rely on this phone when it like breaks down mid text or mid call. I'm like,
Yeah.
so. Anyways,
Okay, I'm looking for the relatives around me. Just want to see.
how do I?
It might take him a second, so maybe we
Okay.
can.
Yeah, we can do
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
Okay, so while we're waiting to see if
Would that have made a difference? Does it make a difference if we're related?
No, I don't think so. But I think, man, I see Polynesians as my relatives,
mm,
and it seems silly that everyone says like makes fun of like, oh, that's my cousin. But the reality is that we're all family, and we we come from cultures similar enough. I know you guys are part Maori, part Tongan, and there's cultures there. They're different, but also very similar. That
Yeah.
we're raised in a culture of love, of family, of
Yeah.
God, and
Ooh,
those things
so
bring us close together.
within that same vein, so you're married to where's she from?
She's a Palangi.
She's a
She's
Palangi.
Canadian American.
Dang.
So what cult? So with our parents, for example, they come from two different islands, and so they raised us in the gospel culture.
Mhm.
That was the culture in our home. Where have you and your wife like? Where is the common ground?
Where's your happy medium?
Yeah, it's definitely the gospel, but we also lean very Tongan too.
Really?
My kids were named by their fahu, my sisters,
Wow.
and because my wife is Palangi, they decided that, okay, we'll give you a little slack. My sister was like, okay, I'm gonna name the first one, which they're Fahu, and then I'm gonna let my sister, my older sister still, name the second, and then you guys can name the rest of your kids. Well, when we got to our third, um, my wife was feeling a special type of way. She was feeling mafana and was like, you know what? I think I want your mom to name her. And as you guys know, in the Tongan
Oh.
culture, that's one of the greatest gifts you can give someone is naming someone after them or asking them to name your kid, because in a sense you're saying, I want my kid to be like you. And so when she told my mom just cried, just like, oh my gosh, this is. So she named my third after her aunt, who's a big part of why we came to America. She was the one who came to BYU Hawaii. Her and her brother did all the paperwork for all of their siblings and their kids. And so we have a Eleanor Whangapulotu Fiefia. So all of our kids have Tongan names other than the fourth, which is he's named after me, Douglas.
Nice.
So I'm the only one in my family with an English name, and so is my son. So
I did not go that route. We just named our kids. I must have gone against my culture by not doing that.
that's okay. My parents were very like traditional in a sense, but they also used the gospel. And so when we were young, I would date a girl, and like if we ever got serious, this is like post mission and stuff. They were like, "Did you tell her?" And I'm like, "What?" And my sisters are waiting for the answer. Like, "Did you tell her we are naming your kids?" And that was always the funny thing that, and most Palangi girls, even Tongan girls, were like, "No, we're not doing that." And that was typically the litmus of
Reaction.
like, oh, I'm sorry, we can't keep dating, or like, oh, this is great. She actually reacted well. So
Wow.
my wife, when I told her, she was like, that is the coolest tradition. That is awesome. And that's when my family knew, like, Jocelyn is the one. And so yeah,
Wow.
Yeah, ours. So just really quickly, I in one of your podcasts it
I
said
didn't
that
do that.
you're the baby in your family, right?
Yeah.
And your family even calls you baby, right?
Yes.
Which I love. So what was it like dating Jocelyn? Like, did she have to like fight her way through the family to gain favor? You know, especially with your mom, I would assume, because I
Yeah.
know Tongan moms are so staunch with their boys. Like, what was that like for her?
Yeah, I think it was nice because my oldest brother married a Palangi, so she kind of like
Paved the way.
paved the way for sure. And they still laugh at it like, "Oh, you're so lucky.
You're so
like
welcome.
you got everything. Like you didn't have to like fight all of the like
Sisters,
the tradition
the
and yeah."
aunties.
And so it was pretty easy coming in. And then I have to give credit to my wife. She is the kindest person I know. And immediately when you see her smile, like, I don't say this because she's my wife, I say this honestly, like, it's easy to love her. And my
That's
family
awesome.
immediately just was like, you need to marry this girl, like she's just good. And the Tongan way of saying it is angalele.
Yeah.
And my grandma could see it. Everyone was just like, oh my gosh, Douglas, like, this is the one. And I'm still figuring things out. I'm still praying. I'm
How
like,
long have you guys been
are you
married?
sure? We've been married 12 years,
Nice.
almost 13. So
Wow.
it's been good.
That's
I'm still
wonderful.
looking to see. Have you?
Oh,
put your
sorry,
husband
I'm,
fired.
like,
Doc,
talking, and then I'm like,
fired.
and it also searching things too.
So I want to follow up with the question, and this is a question that actually comes from a couple of years ago. Went to New Zealand and filmed a documentary, and we followed some Maori youth as they prepared for their kapahaka competition. And anyways, one of my favorite questions to ask them was, "What does it mean to be Maori?" And anyways, I wanted to ask you, like, what does it mean to be Tongan to you?
To me, it means everything. We don't have to dive into this yet, but the DEI bill, that'll be an interesting
Oh,
conversation.
she
But
spoke at that one. So
yeah,
did I.
I watched it. I couldn't go there. I was at work, but I had it on just the live stream,
And
the
if
3
anyone could not
hours.
remember that one, I'd really like to not be remembered in that one. That was such a lame response that I gave. But
I thought it was great. I thought it was good.
So it's everything. Like, that's massive.
It's everything. I like it's every part. It showcases itself in business, in the gospel, in my marriage, in raising my kids,
Politics?
in
What is this?
politics. Yeah, because I would just say there's some people who see their ethnicity or their background as a crutch or something to look back and say, like, this is why I've failed, or this is why. But I think it's the differentiator in who I am. Like, the things that our ancestors did, navigating the seas by using the temperature, the water, the stars, the moon. I mean, I'm navigating the political world in a sense by the same thing and trying to figure out what's what, who's who. People say one thing and then I hear another, and people are trying to give money, and there's ulterior motives. And so there's a lot that really comes out. And so I think that's my superpower, is that I'm Tongan. And
How do you disseminate between that? I mean, like your loyalties to culture, your people.
Well, maybe can I
Go
add to
ahead.
that now?
Yeah.
Because my other question with that was, what does it mean to be American,
Mm.
and how do you balance the two? And how do you balance the two? And like, running for the House, like how?
so if there's things that I take from the Tongan culture, is the love, right? If I think of what is the culture of Tonga, and it's the love. It's love of God, love of people, love of each other. Like, there is, I could be very biased, but there's not a culture that I know of that lives that, I guess, attribute more than the Tongan people. And I think that's just their superpower. And so I bring that to the table when it comes to all facets of my life. When I think of being American and the things that we fought for and now live and have the ability, is freedom. And so I think I couple those together, is like, I bring something that is in politics that can be very fake and very, like, I have to memorize my lines, I have to say what people want to hear. But the reality is, people can see my heart when they meet with me, and I can see theirs. And so that's how I see through the facade of, you're fake, you're just saying hi to me when I'm next to someone important, or
That. Oh
you're
my
only
gosh, that
giving
just
me
makes me
money
cringe.
because I can see
Yeah.
this. And I think that's a skill that I bring from the Polynesian side, is I can see their heart and they can see mine. And um, I think that's helped me navigate this world. And I think it's also helped me in the fact that people can see I'm doing this for the right reasons. I'm not doing this because I'm getting pay or title or anything. Like, there's many other things that I could have been doing to get those things. And I've decided to jump in the race and do this because I really want to make a difference.
So how do you, like, do all of our Polynesian community agree with your stand in politics?
No.
So how do you deal with that?
Um,
What do you do? How do you
bring together?
bring that? Yeah.
yeah, I think people can see me and my values and what I stand for. And I'll be honest, at my kickoff party, I had people that were Democrats, that have lifelong Democrats, that have voted that way. And some people coming up to me and saying, this is the first time in my life I've ever donated to a Republican.
Wow.
And I think that's what we need more of in America, is we need to judge the character of the person, and we need people representing us that are good people, that don't have these other motives that they're controlled by and are pushing them to vote certain ways. And so, although we may diverge on certain things, I think at the end of the day, they know, I think Doug is going to do what he believes is what's right for our cities,
See, and
our state,
yeah,
our people, all of it.
that's the part about being American. Is like we come with different ideas, with different, and it's not that we have different values. I think that Polynesian values are the same, are they not?
Yeah.
So what's different?
Um, if I'm being completely honest, which this is what this is for, I think a lot of the values tend to be conservative. And I think part of me running is reminding Polynesians that they're Republicans and that they're
Yes.
conservative. Like, when you talk about the party that believes in family, that believes in God, that believes in, you know, doing your best and the hard work and the things that we've fought for to make it in this country, I'm sorry, but it's the Republican Party. And I think the Democrats have done a better job of telling a story. And we're
Mm.
storytellers.
Those
And
are
so
fighting words,
we
Doug.
hear the story and we love it and we're like, yeah, that's a good story. They are fighting words, but it's the truth.
Well, and not only that,
I'm gonna sit on this
but um, but our people are very in tune with the heart, and so anything that tends to like even stir the emotions, we're like, oh, that's a good thing. You know, like we measure people according to that, and I totally agree with you that the story, not just the story, but even our stories are being told in ways that aren't representing actually the actual story. And what I love about what you just said about like I want people to meet me is because in Maori culture there's a maxim that like if you want to get to know somebody, like come eye to eye, face to face, because that was the original contract of let's get together and mana to mana, spirit to spirit, we'll suss each other out, and
Mm-hmm.
then at the end of the day we'll know that you're here for peace or you're here for war or battle. And I don't think that there's any other way to um, I guess to share one's beliefs than just to come and sit in that spirit. Hey, where it's not a narrative, it's not a script, it's not me trying to win votes or whatever. It's just me, whether you were running for office or not, you would be doing this.
Yeah.
You know, like just a different venue.
Yeah. I mean, we started Raise the Tide long before I knew I was running. It wasn't to set me up to run. Honestly, it was on stage when I was sitting with the governor and I'm sitting there telling a crowd of 300 to 400 people, get involved, go to your caucus meetings, know who your representatives are, voice your opinions. You know, it's no longer good enough to sit on the sidelines. And I'm thinking, you hypocrite. Right? Because I know the process. I know how it works. I know how laws are passed. I've been a part of campaigns. I've knocked doors. I've done those things. And I'm sitting here, I'm not doing enough.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
that was honestly the like the moment it kind of like clicked and I'm like, you know what?
I remember that day
There's no
because we
longer.
were there. We did ask Governor Cox our
Some tough questions.
There were some tough questions.
Yeah.
And I don't think he particularly enjoyed hers, but I don't know if he enjoyed mine either, but yeah.
But that's
getting
part of
involved-
the process,
It is.
right? And I'm grateful to be in a country where we can do that.
Yeah.
You know, where and that it's a, you know, like whether it was successful or not, that we just have the opportunity to try. Um, I wanted
Absolutely.
to ask you. So in another podcast, you talked about your two. I don't know if it's like issues or platforms that you're standing on. One of them being the family unit, and the
Mhm.
other education and the choice for education. And when you talked about the family, you said that you were surprised by kind of like the backlash you got from even saying that you were standing, um, you know, in representation of or reminding of family. And I just wanted to kind of like dive into that a little bit, like
Sure.
what was the backlash and why, and I guess like what you were talking about before, like how do you bring
how
in
do you
the
explain?
ties?
How do you bring the connection back when
Like this is who we
when
are.
there's a divide?
Yeah, it was interesting. So the backlash came from the left. A lot of it
Is
was
it so easy just to say the left, or is it? I mean, like, is it seriously the left, or
Yeah.
is it just other
yeah. I mean,
ideas?
I I I don't
I
know.
think it's probably easier. Yeah. Anyway, continuing.
So people thought that my kickoff video, I don't know if you guys have seen it, was an attack on LGBTQ
Whoa! How did they make that connection?
because they felt like the family that I was standing up for to protect is the nuclear family, mom, dad, kids. And the reality is that there's families, most families, 1 out of 4 homes don't have a father, right?
Yeah.
There's last I checked, which was last year, there's 1,200 kids in the system that don't have families, right?
Mm.
And it's those families I'm standing up for too, right? Everyone needs that experience of having parents, a home that they feel loved and safe. And so it was an attack on LGBTQ. But if you felt that way, then maybe it's something you need to look internally and figure out, right? Like
Yeah.
this is not
What?
a battle
Yeah.
for it's. There are things that are entering our homes that we're not okay with, and then
Yeah.
if you go and ask the LGBTQ community, I think the majority feel the same too. Like, yeah, I have a different looking family, but I don't want those things in my home either, right?
Yeah.
But they still want family.
They still want family.
Yeah.
However that family looks, they still want family.
And the reality is, if I am elected, there will be a large portion that aren't in the same party, and I still have to represent them.
Mm.
And so that doesn't mean that I only represent the 60% in my district that tend to be Republican or more on the conservative side. I represent everyone. And
Yeah.
so I want to hear your thoughts and your opinions. So it was interesting that the family was so controversial. I thought that was the one thing that we could all agree on is
Yeah. Well, that's just, very telling, of the times. Something that is so significant to us would be seen that way. I don't know. Like, again, what you said, storytelling. And actually, me and my family were just talking about this on Sunday, just like how you tell a story matters. Like, to me, that's the make or break of bondage and freedom, and how it's upheld and how it's preserved. I wanted to. Do you have? I keep
was just
asking all of
thinking
these
about-
questions.
No, go ahead, continue.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking about families and how do you represent everybody? That's such a hard thing to do. How do you represent everyone in your community? What is the best way that Doug Fiefia goes about doing that?
it's what we talked about. It's sitting in living rooms and listening, right?
And how's that been?
It's been good. I haven't been in a lot of homes. A lot of it's been hours and hours on the phone. Last night I spent 3 hours talking to constituents.
How many? So just for clarity, right now, where are the boundaries for your legislative
Well, and
district that you're
also,
running for?
Are you running? Is there an incumbent or is the seat open?
The seat is open now. Initially, when we announced we were running against the incumbent,
Who was the or who is?
his name is Representative Jacob. He's decided not to seek re-election, and
So it is open now.
it's open seat, and someone jumped in literally the last minute of filing to file.
So there is someone you're running against.
There is, yeah,
Another Republican.
another
candidate?
Republican and another Democrat.
Oh wow.
So we're going through the caucus convention system. Both of us we're not collecting signatures, and so
That's the man right there. Definitely.
You
the
just
thought
make
is
me want to cry hearing you say that. That means so much to me. And no judgment against those who go the signature route, but like that just says so much about your character.
yeah, I appreciate that. And so
That's hard.
it's hard. It's tough. It's
But it's certain. I mean, so you'll be in the state convention then.
or sorry, county.
County.
It'll be county.
Oh, it is county because
Yeah.
it's House.
Yeah.
So where are the boundaries for you? Just to be clear.
Yeah, so Harriman, Riverton, and South Jordan, it covers different sections of that. So it's about half of Harriman, about
Like half of Harriman from where to where, so that people know.
it's more on the northwest side of Harriman. So basically from City Hall 134 north of Harriman, and then it covers parts of west. But the thing is that if you look at the map, the drawings are so weird. It's
Yeah.
not a clean like this is your
No.
square,
Right.
and so it's all over the place. But I have about 30-ish% of Riverton, and then about 10 to 15% of South Jordan, the
It's a
Daybreak
big
side.
area, and like you said, it's growing so fast, just like
It's-
Saratoga.
Yeah,
It's
so
growing a
it's
ton, and so we need representation there. This seat is newer, so Representative Jacob, this is his first term. His first term is the first they've opened up this seat, so
What
this
was
is
his
a
reason
newer
for
seat.
not running for re-election?
No comment. Can I do that?
Well, yeah.
It's
Off camera.
yeah. I think there's a lot of reasons. Yeah,
Okay.
this is going to be public, and so
Yeah.
you'd have to ask him. I think that'd
Yeah,
be a
we'll
great
ask
question to
him.
ask him. But I think he's taking a break from things, and I'm sure you'll see him in
That
other
was a
elections.
great answer.
Yeah, that was a
That's
great
a
answer.
great answer.
Okay, so I've got. I want to actually ask what bills you're following up at the legislature this session. But before that, I want to talk about civic engagement because that's my thing. Um, what? Why do you think our people don't participate? Like what?
Yeah.
Like what is the like? Is it fear? Fear of not knowing, like being in spaces that they don't know. Um, I think.
Oh, can I add to that?
Yeah.
So when we were at the Raise the Tide, the questions that she and that we asked the governor, it was quiet. We were shocked at how quiet that the audience became. And we spoke with one of the attendees, and she told us, she says, it became very apparent to us what we didn't know.
Yeah.
But would you want to know if you didn't know?
Yeah.
Like that's where I'm confused because
this is not one of those trying to.
Why not go ask questions?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit lack of education on it, and I think a lot of them feel like because we can't. So we all, our parents, you guys immigrated, right? And now you're kind of an outsider, and so you're not a part of the system, and it's just kind of like
outsider, like
as you're not a citizen yet, or you just have come into, you're the new person in class, right?
Yeah.
And so you're just kind of observing and seeing how things work. And I think, even my parents still, they've done more things political in the last 6 months of me campaigning than they ever have in the, I don't know how long it's been, 40 plus years that they've been in America.
That's so cool.
And so I think it's like lack of education, but it's kind of like still kind of figuring out where do I fit in the system and do I actually have a say? And I think the reality is like your vote is worth as much as anyone else's here. Your one vote is the same as the one vote as your neighbor, right? And so I think there's a bit of fear though, is I don't know it, and so I'm just gonna let them do their thing and I'll do what I know, which is working hard, providing for my family, going to church and doing those things. And I think what we're seeing now is it does matter, and that's what I hope with this run, that it helps. And even I think there's 4 other candidates or 3 other candidates that are running that are Polynesian, is that our people get engaged. Like people are going to caucus night, people are registering to vote, people are voting, people are knocking doors, and I think you'll see
is
that.
Is it more than just knocking doors? I noticed that we shared a common friend, Carlos Moreno.
Yeah.
Because he's very involved politically in his neighborhood. He's all about that, isn't he?
He starts fires everywhere.
He's a good friend. So we were student body presidents at the same time. He was the student body president at Slick, and I was at Utah State. And then we sat on a board called the Utah Student Association. And so our board, all the student body presidents, we represented all of the 300,000 students in Utah. And I think that's actually where we started getting engaged politically, because we were like, hey, we're a large 300,000 votes is a big voting block. And so,
but getting people engaged, I mean, like, I noticed that he really wants people to be more engaged, to understand the principles of freedom. One of the things that that I've noticed, like, so we talked about our Polynesians perhaps not necessarily having that similar engagement yet. It's not just a Polynesian thing, because that can happen even in my own neighborhood where there's very low interest. How do you get people interested? I mean, like in politics and what's going on at the legislative level.
And to add to that, I feel like we were in committee just a couple of weeks ago, and there was somebody who was speaking in committee, and I think she was of Polynesian descent, and she was like, why don't I see anybody here that looks like me? And I was like, well, why don't you run, sis? Like, what are you waiting for? I mean, like, our parents came here not having anybody with their last names or language, and they killed it because they had to.
Yeah.
Because they had to put a roof over our heads, because they had to put food on our tables. And I don't understand that kind of mentality of like, I won't do anything until I see representation. Well, then there you go. Yeah. Don't be mad when policies are being passed and you're waiting for one of us to be up there. You be the one to be up there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the message is like we've got to be the generation that runs. Like, who else was going to do it? Our
Yeah.
parents? Like, no, they just got here, right?
Yeah.
And so we're the next ones,
We
and it's
got
like,
you here. It's your turn. To
yeah.
do
So now
something
we
else.
have to run, and so
And I think our parents are asking us to do that. You know,
Yeah.
because they're like, we did everything that we could. Like, because we even had this conversation with our mom, and she was like, me and your father are old, and we can't keep up with everything happening. And she
You
like,
make it sound like they're 100 years old.
well, but they're getting older, and so she was just like literally passing on the baton of like,
Yeah.
can you please take care of the family in the political arena, in the civic arena, and tell us what's going on, so we can fortify the home. And that was massive for me because they have like brought us across the biggest ocean in the world,
Yeah.
and set up camp here in a country that isn't their own with a language that isn't their own. Like, yeah, I can do that, mom. And so there's like, I just don't understand why people don't take the steps into the unknown. Like, you have the greatest reason to step.
Yeah.
But when
into
someone
the
says
unknown.
when someone says something like, "Well, I don't see more people like me," do they not understand that there is a running process to? Well, hey, I see someone like me because you're running for office.
Yeah. And so the follow up question is, are you supporting candidates that look like you? Are you willing to run? Are you recruiting people? Like,
Are you voting?
what are
Even?
you doing
Yeah.
to change that, right? And
So how would you change that? How would you change
I mean, you
the
are
narrative?
changing that, right?
I think that's it. I'm running.
But I also
It's
love
like,
that.
what more can I do? Raise the tide,
Sorry.
go and run for office? Do you not see? Start my own business.
But I love that the reason for you even running is not even political, but it's like, this is going to be a blessing to my community if I can just ask and petition in behalf of the needs um, of my community. Like, to me, that's so different because it's not, to me, it's not a selfish ask.
Yeah.
It's not a selfish decision. But I agree with my sister. You've just got so much on your plate. Hey, how do you?
What more do you need?
I mean, I hope people come along. That's the whole point of me running too, is educating and bringing people along with the process. And that's what I've tried to do in all areas of life is my parents opened the door and I've gotten into rooms or opportunities that I feel grateful because they've opened the door, and I've kept the door open so other people can come in. And that's what we need to do more of, is bring people along and educate and inform. And like, my mom called me after the State of the State address and was like, I watched it. And I was like, what? Like, my mom watched the State of the State address? Like, wow. Like, this is, I mean, my mom knows now what the caucus system works, like how to become a delegate. And like, we're doing so much to inform and educate. And that's the hope, that if nothing else, if we lose this race, which we're not,
Look at you,
that
Doug.
people know and are informed and are more engaged. And I think it takes more of us doing it and informing. I think what you guys are doing with this podcast is great. Is we have to be the change that we want to see. And if it's informing, if it's running, whatever it is, we've got to be the next generation of leaders.
So I have like so many questions. Another question I have.
We have so many questions. Sorry,
That's
Doug.
okay. You're good.
Another question. So I'm gonna use an analogy. I know the Super Bowl Sunday is coming up this Sunday, and someone, well, back when the Patriots were playing, I remember saying, I'm going to vote. I mean, like, I hope the Patriots win because I like Giselle, because she's from Brazil and I like Brazilians and I love Portuguese. And then I commented after that saying, and if you think that that's really weird, that's kind of how voting looks like too on election day. I'm going to vote for someone because I relate with them, because they're my friend. How I know that there tends to be, or rather, I observe that there tends to be a tendency to, I'm going to vote for so and so because of the way that he or she looks, or because he or she is Polynesian, not necessarily caring much for the actual principles that help a society to function freely. How do you make the distinction?
Are you talking about from a voter's perspective?
Yeah.
It takes homework, which I think that's where people disengage, right? It's like, oh, I've got to read their website, I've got to watch their videos, I've got to
ask them questions.
look at their voting record, I've got to
Yeah.
figure that out. Like that's where it's tough, and I think people start like, actually, I don't want to do that. I'll show up to vote, but I'll just pick whoever has the coolest name, or
Someone
if
you
I
know
recognize
personally, yeah,
them.
because you're Polynesian, I'm going to vote for you because you're Poly.
Yeah, and so it's sad, but it's the sad reality, and I think that's we were
How would you
talking about.
change that?
Well, I think the caucus system solves that. We talked
If
about
they
it,
go
right?
to caucus.
Yeah.
Well, it's
When is caucus? When
it's
is caucus
because March 5th, and it's
Yeah.
because people who are doing the homework are going and they're informed and they're voting that way and representing the neighborhood and the
Yeah.
neighborhood's values. And so I think it solves a little bit of that problem, and I think that's why Utah has that system in place. Is
Bring in people who otherwise wouldn't engage
Yeah.
into the arena.
yeah,
Another thing that I've noticed is that Republicans have a short, Republicans in Utah don't have a huge minority presence. Why?
Oh, yeah.
What?
well,
Bloody useless.
I think we're going to change that. I think Carlos
Yeah,
is
he's
key
definitely-
to the Latinos.
Yeah, well, Carlos is, you are too, but why? What would make a difference? How do you change that?
Yeah, and just to add to that, like
How do you bring them in?
I live in Beaver County, and I've asked our county central committee, like, why aren't you reaching out to the immigrants and refugees in our community? I'm like, do you think they don't care about liberty or freedom?
Yeah.
Like, what is going on? And I feel like they're like, the Democrats got it. They know how to hang out with them. I'm like, oh my gosh, you do not know our community.
Yeah. So we're working on things. Carlos is engaged in there. I am. Party leadership, I'm not going to say names because they have to stay neutral still. But we're going to put on a cultural celebration that meets them where they're at, right? We know food, we love music, we love getting together and seeing each other. And we're going to create these type of gatherings where then we can inform. And so we kind of lower the barriers of like, hey, this is us, you know me,
Yep.
I know you, come to an event, and then let's just inform people, like, how do you register? Let's get you registered.
What do you think it is that turns them off to the Republican Party?
I don't think it's a Republican Party thing. I think it's
You
just
don't think so?
I don't. I think the people who are the most active tend to be Democrats. And that's why it seems like Polynesians, Latinos are Democrats. But if you went to the masses and talked to people, the reality is that their values tend to be more conservative. And so I think it still goes back to that fear
Yeah.
of like, it's the unknown, like, oh, I don't fit in, I don't know anything about
Yeah.
politics, I'm not going to that event.
Well, and I don't know that the
Wow.
Republican Party, at least the previous, have really made an effort to teach things like parliamentary procedure, to teach,
They
about
are in Utah County.
about rules of engagement, because when you, like, it's intimidating going to committee and they're using Parley Pro and you're like, wait, what? There are rules that I have to use, and it just sounds like people are just like posturing,
Which there's a lot of that.
Yeah, there is. And you know what I call it? I call it LARPing. I feel like the Republican Party in the past are
Oh,
adults,
just let me go get my Legolas.
are individuals who, it feels like a sorority fraternity, like, it's a club of adults who don't have friends, but now we have friends and we can fight for liberty together.
Oh, that is.
Hey.
Wow.
Hey.
Wow.
Hey.
Ouch. T.
We're gonna get in trouble for this.
I'm fine with getting in trouble. I get in trouble all the time. But the reason why I bring that up is because I've been trying to reach out to the party. Okay, no, I haven't, because I unaffiliated, but I affiliated. I've been trying to figure out how to bring person who doesn't know anything about caucus, anything about, like the first time I voted, I didn't realize that there would be amendments that I would have to vote on. I didn't know that there would be judges that I would have to vote on. And so I did a eeny, meeny, miny, mo. That name sounds good.
Yeah.
And then I left that poll, and I was like, that's never going to happen again.
Yeah.
Ever going to happen again, because I was infuriated that I was so ignorant. Anyways,
I think you're right. I think previously there's been a lack of outreach on the party's part. Not only to like,
And I think in some ways it can be kind of intimidating to want to go in and not know anything that's going on. It's like I'm going to step out. Bye.
and also I don't think they want to come in as like the white man telling Polynesian Latinos what to do. And the reality
And
is
they're
that
not like that.
they are like that. So they are white men, and so they don't know like what's the rules of engagement here. So
yeah.
it's almost the same
Oh.
thing they're afraid of. Is like, how do I approach Polynesians? And then the Polynesians are like, how do I approach these white people to learn,
It's like
right?
dancing around each
And
other.
so it's this whole thing. And so I think that's why it's key that me, Carlos, and other people are running, is because we can be that mediator of like, hey guys, it's not that scary. Actually, we all agree on the same thing. Let's have some food and party. And by the way, let's register to vote.
I have a follow up
Nice.
question, just going back to like you said. I think the reason why they don't engage is because maybe a lack of education. What kind of education?
Oh, that's a good
What kind
question.
of
Yeah,
education?
are you
What
talking
what
about when you say that?
I'm just thinking of like during like colonial times, like before America became a country, like the ordinary citizens were active, and many of them didn't have like institutional education. And I feel like our people do have an education, but they just maybe feel like it doesn't stand up to par with the education here. Like, so what kind of education do you think an ordinary citizen should have to engage?
Yeah, I don't think it's much the institutional education. I think it's just the lack of information. Like,
Mm,
because our people came in as immigrants, we were worried about putting food on the table and getting our kids to school and how do I afford the clothes. Like, that was the necessary thing.
Yeah.
Voting was secondary. Like, who is president, who's governor, who's my, like, I need to feed my kids, right?
mm,
And so we've been in that mentality forever, and it's worked. And typically, great that we live in a conservative state that, the economy typically is great, unemployment is very low, that it just kind of worked for us.
mm,
And so I think that's what I mean, is like they didn't have time to do those, learn
mm,
and to read up on candidates. And
mm.
I think now is the time that we're realizing, oh, we're kind of feeling a little bit of a shift.
Yeah,
Like, oh, maybe we need to start doing things. And
yeah.
I
Well, and
think,
there's so many things happening where like I need to make time to give to that
yeah,
because it's directly impacting my family.
yeah. And I think a lot of our Polynesians have done well now in their careers and different industries that they're working in, that now they have that time and they realize that a law that's changed really affects them, right? Even looking during COVID, like restaurant owners, or I have a Polynesian Maori guy in our district that he owns wedding event centers,
Does he?
and
Oh,
he's like,
cool.
man, I'm so grateful for my legislators because they helped me stay open when
Mm,
the rest of the state was shutting down and the
right,
rest of the country, and we would have been in a world of trouble
right.
if they didn't listen to me as a small business owner. And so I think we're starting to see like, oh, government does matter, and that's why we've brought, you know, government leaders to Raise the Tide.
Mm,
Is it was very business and real estate and entrepreneurship focused, but the reality is that they're tied,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
What they do on the state level, on a national level, it affects all of
On a
our
local
businesses.
level, even.
One of the things that I notice when I look at legislators or anyone who's running is I mean, even Carlos mentioned it. It's like, who has the end of your leash? Who owns you? Um, can you say that you are your own person, that no one, that you're not beholden to anybody?
Yeah, there's my wife holds my leash, which is, that was intentional. I put the leash on and she's, the
Good for
collar on and
you.
she's good. But there's I've had donations from legislators from different PACs. Um, there's money that I've stayed away from.
Mm,
Um, but I think the
Now you're
PACs,
having way of asking one asking more questions about that. I'll ask you off camera.
sure. But I've the money that's come is because they believe in the same things that I believe in, and
mm,
I don't feel that any relationship or money that I've taken in is tied to an ask. I think it's more so, hey, I believe in what you believe in too. Let me support you. Let me fundraise for you. Let me write you a check. So I asked me in 5 years, and I hope the answer is the same. I think it's crazy seeing people who sell their soul
Oh,
for
yeah.
that. Like, so
Yeah, I mean, oh, well, I mean, which I had another follow-up question then. So do you intend to make this a continual thing? Will you continue running for
I'll
office?
I'll stay engaged as long as I'm effective, and running until, you know, Wayne Niederhauser, a former speaker,
Yeah,
or
I
sorry,
know.
Senate leader.
Yeah.
We sit on a couple of boards at Utah State together, and I've kind of seen his career. And he just kind of up and retired. And one of his close friends told me that he asked him, like, why did you step, or why did you quit? And he said, um, I started to see myself as, I don't know, I don't want to misquote him, almost irreplaceable.
Mm.
And that's when I knew I needed to leave. When you get to the point where you think like,
No,
I'm
nothing
above,
good's gonna happen without
yeah.
me in there.
So it's
Yeah.
just like, oh, I need to leave. I need fresh perspective. So
There's a saying. There's a
Mm.
saying in one of my favorite sayings in The Dark Knight. Batman, The Dark Knight is it's like you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Um, I and that's kind of something that I worry about with politicians, with those with elected officials, is that they stay in long enough. It's like the ones that I had so much hope for. You just see them kind of go down the hill. How will you stay
Well, and
you?
yeah, like how will you? Because we talk about principles a lot, and when you're up at the legislature, you're like, wow, that went out the door real quick.
yeah,
Like how will you stay grounded and hold that line? Because I feel like the legislators feel like they have to compromise and leverage principle in order, for the whole or for like whatever interest group. Like how do you not lose self?
yeah. So I think there's uh, core values that you um, never compromise on, and then there's things that I think there's compromise on. Like, there's views that maybe a party holds that they think it's core values, but the reality is, like, some things don't really matter, and we can talk and debate on different sides of an issue and say this is the best way, that's the best way. Let me give you an example that I've come across that people are like, what, you think this way? And I'm like, actually, I don't really have a strong opinion on either side. City incentives, right? So
Mm.
you have cities that can give tax breaks to companies to come in and be in their city, whether it's a restaurant or a store.
Mm.
And some people think, no, that's governments should not choose winners and losers.
What do
On
you
the
think?
on the other side, there's let me answer this real quick.
Okay.
There's on the other side, it's, well, who's going to want to come to our city if we don't offer something, right? If it's us versus Salt Lake City, oh, like, we need something to pull in these businesses that are going to drive revenue for
Mm.
taxes and lower taxes for everything else, right?
Mm.
And help fund schools and et cetera, et cetera. Um, I do believe that government should. I believe in small government, so the less government, the better. And I do believe that they shouldn't choose winners and losers.
Mm.
But on the flip side, if you have a city like Harriman, which I live in, sometimes it can be hard to get a business to invest in a small city that's kind of out of the traffic. And
Mm.
so it's like,
Off the
how do you still benefit to build infrastructure on the commercial side when you can't give some type of incentive to say, hey, this is a partnership, we're going to both benefit? So I tend to be somewhere in the middle there.
Mm.
And me compromising on that, I don't see that's like, whoa, Doug, you've changed. Wow, I can't
Mm.
believe you gave up this core value, which is what? Like, yeah, maybe you can
Independence
say I
and
believe in
non-dependence.
small government. Yeah, that's core to what I believe. But also, does that mean we don't have businesses there, and then the tax bill on every household is higher? And so I think there's certain issues that will drive compromise, and you
Mm.
have to, because there can be two core values that are imbalanced on a certain issue or law or policy that you have to find what's the happy medium here. And so there's core values, things like God, family, faith that I will never go against. But then there's some issues that's like, we've got to figure out what's the best. And the reality is like there's two sides
like the practical
arguing.
aspects of things sometimes.
Yeah. There's two sides arguing, and we don't really know what the best what the best answer is until we actually do it and we figure it out. And so
But when it comes to principle like that, I mean, like, how do you, like, would you compromise principle for practicality just for?
Can I kind of add to your question? So our sister uses this analogy a lot of gravity, and to me, gravity is pretty core. And coming to understand the laws of gravity. Once you understand the laws of gravity, then you can have something like flight, right? And I wonder if principles also have the same capability of not necessarily like bending or breaking principle, but understanding the principle so core that you create something that's never been done before. Because I was just thinking of like innovation and like, can you really innovate without some kind of like you have to understand the laws, and you can break yourself on the laws, which many inventors have over time, right? But they eventually, now we have flight. And so how do you find the balance between like, because compromise is kind of like a dirty word, especially in politics.
Yeah, it is.
You know, but I wonder if there's something actually that we haven't tapped into, and maybe that's where entrepreneurship and like that real innovation of being a creator comes through.
yeah, I think there's probably I think there's this is my interpretation. You can tell me if you agree or disagree, but I think I think you've tapped into and maybe another side of this. There's the laws, then there's I think core principles, which you can have very different core principles than me, but the law remains the same for us, right? You can't fly and I can't fly unless we jump in an airplane and that, right? There's certain laws that exist, and I think that's certain things that they've captured in the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, like we are all sons and daughters of God, we are all created equal. Like those are laws that we can't change.
And if we try to, we break ourselves on them.
Yes.
Constant.
Yeah. And then there's core principles, and then I think there's interpretations of where your core principles and stuff are. So, is there, I think your question, going back to your question, is there some innovation that maybe we haven't seen? Probably, because we have now AI, which the next version of AI is generative AI that's coming out, that we have to adapt, right? Like policy and the way that government works. People are now debating digital currency. Like there's technology, the way it's moving is going to change the way that we regulate and that we preside over people. It's an authority. It's going to completely change the game, and it's going to take innovators to figure out, okay, what's the best way we keep up with this, and what's the best way that we find the balance of we need to allow citizens and individuals and businesses to thrive and grow, but we also need to protect the individual citizen and their privacy and their individual rights. And so what's that balance? And that's going to take the innovation that I think we'll see in government that hasn't been seen yet.
Yeah, I think that is really the heart of lawmaking, you know, of like taking steps without forgetting the past, you know, and doing that in real time. I'm curious to like we were in committee listening to a bill, and the emotions were high with this particular bill. And where do you see yourself standing, like when that dilemma is placed before you? Like, because that's a hard. It's hard to preserve. It's hard to. It's a hard sell when people's like, I've experienced so much pain and suffering because of this, but you're like, yeah, but the constant. Like even if I bend on this constant, it's still going to be there. And I feel like a lot of legislators are missing that. Like they don't have that, okay, I am relative to that. That is a fixed feature. It is never going to move for all of the eternities and all of the generations. And I just feel like that would, as a lawmaker, how do you, again, just I guess going back to the theme of what we're talking about, how do you balance accountability? How do you balance individual choice, and a fixed constant?
That's a tough question. So maybe looking deeper into your question, I think the way that I would do it as a legislator is I have my core values. There's the laws that are constant, my core values. And then I think what a lot of people miss is reading the bill.
Oh my gosh, amen.
So
Why? It's like, but the highlights are so much easier.
yeah,
to read.
so like
the summaries are so
there's a
nice.
summary and also the headlines, right?
Yeah. Oh, I forgot about that.
And
yeah.
I think we've got to look deeper, because
Yeah.
if people actually read the bill,
Yes.
then they would say, "Oh, maybe this is actually not as bad as I thought, or maybe it's better than I thought, or maybe it's actually closer to what I align with and what I
Yeah.
believe."
Yeah.
But we've got to then go back to our core values and check. And a lot of the controversial bills that have come up, if you read the bill,
would it be as controversial as people say that
no,
it is? Exactly.
it wouldn't.
Exactly.
And the groups that feel disenfranchised and affected by it, they would realize that, oh, this is actually helping me.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
this is actually like transgender bill, the bathroom bill. Nothing for you changes. What it's actually hurting are the bad actors, the people who are faking like they're a certain gender and being perverts, and they're sickos, right? That's who it's going after. So it's actually protecting you and saying, we don't want to mix you with this group, because there's people who found a loophole in inclusion. You've made your decision. I respect your decision to be an adult and make those decisions for you. But there's people who haven't made that decision, who are now finding a loophole and are perverts and decided to, like, oh, I can act like this and I can go into restrooms and do this. And so if they read the bill, they would see that actually I don't even fit that. So I'm good, right? And so there's certain bills that are interesting that if you read it and you looked at its core, that
so it sounds like you're going to be one of those advocates. Read the bill. Read the bill.
Yeah, I mean that's
so important.
But that's, again, it goes to the homework. That's where people stop. Is, they get riled up and they see the headlines and
cool.
Well, I mean, like, how do you even like? Not only that, but
the legislature.
But it's not just the common citizen that's doing that. I wouldn't be surprised if journalists are doing the same thing. Like, if they're not also reading the bill in its entirety and then just going ahead and posting or just sharing information that is not entirely.
Their motives are different. Is not to educate. It's to get clicks and buyers. And that's not what they care about, right? It's like, and we've
this
realized
is a really dangerous conversation.
I know. This is the end of my career. Thanks, guys. It was nice knowing you. See you later. I'm going back to the private sector.
I love the private sector. I love the private sector.
But it's conversations that should be had, and it's the reality is that we've learned that the media it's a dying industry, and you have now other outlets that people can share and post, and people are going to that as their news source. And so you have to take, these hot, flashy headlines and put it up there, even though it's not what's reality, and get people to click on it, like it, repost it. And if you looked at the core of it, there's nothing there. And so, yeah, read the bill, do your homework, figure it out. And
what would you, if you could say anything regarding self-advocacy, doing your own work, not getting a handout, but have you thrived on handouts? Do you know people who thrive on handouts?
I think it's so cool that your organization,
that you guys have just done that for free and for other people.
Well, and that
with your own money, that's hard.
Yeah,
that's really hard.
Like, that to me is just so epic on so many levels. And one of my friends a couple of years ago, he's a law professor at the U. I think he's a friend. I don't know if I'm his friend, but he said that federal funding is like crack. And I've never forgotten that. And he's like, because once you get a little bit, you just keep getting, it's like an addiction, more and more and more and more. And I just think it's so epic that you and your crew decided to go that route, because that just says so much about your integrity, about your mana, about your work ethic, and also about your faith and trust in what you're doing, right? Because that's no small feat.
Yeah, I had a call with someone who's trying to start something separate. The Polynesian guy, he's trying to start kind of like a course and wants to put on big events and wants to do things. And so he was just picking my brain on like, how did you guys do it? How'd you start? And we knew that there was value to our people, right? It's like talking about how to, improve your businesses, whether it's marketing, financials. We knew there was value there in real estate and investing, and we have experts that can come talk about it. So we knew the value was there. And then we had to ask the question, okay, how do we pay for this? And a lot of us were business owners on the board that we created. So we were like, oh, we'll just pay for it. And then I'm like, well, there's value that's there to business owners. So we've just got to figure what that is. And our first event was, I just love what you guys are doing. I'm just going to give. And so we were grateful for the people and the businesses that donated early on. But then we were like, wait, we have 100+ people coming to this. Businesses want to get in front of people. This is pretty cheap marketing. And so we put together like some sponsorship tiers.
That's awesome.
And they get access to, whatever our lists, our people, set up a table. They can speak at our events.
That's awesome.
And that's what we found, right? And it was like kind of gritty and just trying to figure things out. And all of our events were in the positive. We have money in our bank account. That's and awesome. It's all paid by the private sector. We had banks that were like, oh, you're going to have people come? We want to sign them up. Oh, I have this product I want to sell. Come and sell your cookies. Come and sell whatever it is. And so we have value because we can bring the masses out. And they'll come because it's free. We're feeding them lunch. We're giving them value. There's actual great speakers coming to teach them.
So you found a way to market and to network at the same time, and also to stay in the positive. That's amazing. Well, that's innovation right there.
Well, and not only that, but to market to people who maybe otherwise wouldn't participate.
Yeah.
Like they came, they got there. Our baby brothers love you. Yeah, when they heard that we were going to be interviewing you, because they know of our temperament, and they were like,
can you please not embarrass us? Can you please not embarrass our family?
But both of them were like,
our honor,
everything. I love Doug. And we're like, okay.
Oh,
give us our opportunity to love Doug on our
terms.
Yeah, on our terms.
So to go back to kind of your question, we are not beholden to anyone. Like there's no one pulling the strings other than a small board of friends.
Or just for
all
you
business owners.
Even you're not beholden to anybody.
Yeah, but like also like organizations that get government funding, they now have to check boxes and fill out paperwork and prove that they're doing X amount.
Jumping high enough.
And
the loop. I mean, not the loops, but the hoops that they have to jump through in order to get.
Yeah, and the value's there. People come, they see it, they feel it, they learn, and we can go back. This is the difference. We can go back and point to businesses, to deals, to individuals that have come to our events and now are thriving because of the things they learned, right? And that's the difference between what we're doing. And it's free. And so what we've tried to change and get people to go back to is the only way that this works is if you give it freely, right? And that's at our core as Polynesians. We give freely. We are the most loving and giving people. And so I'm not teaching you this business principle because I'm trying to get something out of you. It's, I want you to thrive and be great. And this is why I'm giving this to you.
And that's interesting because, I mean, like for me, that's how I got interested in going to the legislature. Was a friend of mine offered a free legislative boot camp. Here's what you get to learn. And so I went because it was free, and I went for the food mainly. But usually that's how it is in the first place, but then you learn something different when you go, and I was really grateful for that. So thank you for what you do for our community.
Yeah,
thank you.
I do have another question, and it's from one of my kids, so it's probably my final question, but he said that one of the reasons that he's not interested, and I'm talking about the 20-year-olds, the 20 somethings, the what is that, Gen
Z.
are they Gen Z?
Mhm.
How do you make politics less political? Because that's what turns them off.
What's your definition of political?
That's a good question. I don't, and I probably should have asked about that. But he just said if like even with, I'll just use the Republican Party as an example. He says if they would be less Republican and like if they would be less political, I would probably be more interested in it. And I think maybe when they start to blame Democrats or they start
Or
to
they start to draw a line in the sand, like I have to choose between, literally in our community, between a brother and a sister. You know, I don't think I don't like that either.
what do you do in a situation like that?
Um, that's an interesting question. Someone asked me the same thing, but more so maybe our generation, like why we're not getting involved in politics.
Mm.
Um, my answer is like we've raised a very selfish generation.
Mm.
So that this is not your son, but it's right. It's like instead of like looking at our parents' generation where it was like, how can we help other people? Like knowing your neighbors and being comfortable to go ask for sugar or an egg if it was a Sabbath and you didn't want to go to the store. It's like, hey, do you guys have an extra?
Right.
That never happens, right? Like you don't
Oh,
see
it still
that.
happens in my neighborhood.
Does it?
We still
Well,
But not as
that's
commonplace
great.
it's not
anymore,
as
I don't
common
think.
as it used to be.
Yeah.
So I think we've raised a generation that are looking inward more, and we've got to figure out how to get them to look outward.
At the same time, though, I mean, though too, I mean, like I look at him, I think when he sees, those commercials paid for by so and so, running for office, but it looks and sounds like politics. It's like I know that there's more to politics than what I'm seeing, but is this like is this politics? What they're showing? I'm going to vote for, I mean, I'm doing this. My opponent is not going to be doing this, or my opponent goes this direction. Maybe that's what he thinks of when he thinks of politics, where it's just more the blame and I'm better than,
Yeah.
kind of like posturing, so to speak. And so I wonder if that would be.
It's a hard balance because even in me and my race, um, I'm running against another Republican. I think we probably agree on 90+% of issues, but our approach is very, very different. And so it's hard then to get 75 delegates to see the difference without pointing out the difference. And sometimes it's not worth losing to take the higher road and say, oh, we're good. He's a great guy. When you know deep down inside that the way you would go about things is very different, right?
I mean, like, so that's a really good point that you bring up because for me, I think that people have a tendency to abandon what they know to be good about what they have, about the product that they have. It's like, do you believe your product well enough to not worry about whether or not you're going to get the votes when it comes down to the wire, when it comes down to, do you believe you're good enough to hold it? I mean, like, would you change anything? Would you try to put another person down to win? Or would you trust what you have done is good enough, is strong enough to hold it? Because that for me is what makes me sad, is when I see people who like change in the next minute, they make that decision. I'm thinking, I had so much hope for you. I wish you would have stayed you. But when you played that game, it's like, But then I understand why that needs to happen too. So for me, it's a kind of a.
Politics is a very, very tricky game. I'll give you an example. So even candidates are kind of aligning and like, hey, we should work together. Let's do town hall together. And there's candidates that are both to the right and left of me. And it's hard then to like, how do I agree to help them and work with them when I know that maybe we don't agree on every issue, but I know it's going to help me and I know it's going to help them. And I had this discussion with one of my friends who's running as a candidate that I'm willing to help this candidate even though they're to the left of me, because the reality is they're the only one who I believe that can beat the Democrat. And
Wow.
if I'm taking someone that's pink or light red versus dark blue, I take that every day because we align on 80% versus 0%. And I would take 80% of something good than 0% of nothing, right? So it's like sometimes you have to, I think in politics, not change your core values, but there's bigger wins ahead, right? So some people might see my name with someone else's and like, why did you put your name on that with that person?
Yeah.
And the reality is there's a greater good ahead.
Mm.
And if we're fighting to get and move in the right direction, sometimes taking someone who's moving kind of right is better than someone pulling far left, right? So I think we've got to get away from that, the left and right and pulling. And I think the media has done a good job of pulling us
Yeah,
apart.
because it polarizes the conversations. We don't, like there's so much gray.
Yeah.
But all we see are the black and whites, and I don't like that.
And people don't explain this,
No.
right? Like people will see my name with someone else's and be like, "Oh, that's interesting. Why did you do that?" Or you took that endorsement. Why did you take that endorsement? And the reality is it's for the
It's
greater good.
And
And
so
sometimes
does it matter where it comes from if it's a good?
yeah.
Does it matter?
I mean, just because someone endorses you doesn't mean you agree with everything. Like I think someone put it Rob Axon, he's the Utah Republican chair.
Yeah.
He put it great. He's like, the person I do disagree the most with, and we were at the Lincoln Day dinner, and he's like, in this room, that I disagree with the most is my wife. And I love her, and I will be with her for eternity.
Yeah.
And so I think there's something we can learn from that is just because you disagree on an issue doesn't mean you can't love each other and agree on everything else. Like, like me and my wife, same. We disagree on the most things, and some of the things are just not, should we go eat here or here? It doesn't really matter. But the reality is, like, you can still get along and still disagree. Yeah. And I might get in trouble by saying this, but I love the governor's like disagree better campaign, and people are going to read into that and read into this and think that he's a rhino or whatever. But like the reality is that the message is good, is what we need. Is you can disagree on things without calling each other the devil or evil, right? Like I think at people's core is they are good people trying to do what's right the most of the time. There's some bad actors, but like calling people like some of those names that I've heard now entering the political world, I'm like, dang, like you don't even know that person like personally, and you're calling them out on social media that they're the devil or they're evil or they're this and that. And I think we can use less of that. Like,
yep, I agree. I have just one question for you, but really quickly, did you ever find out if we're related?
It might be something we do. I can sit here and do this.
Oh no, that's okay. Just wanted to follow up on that. We can find that off camera. But either way, I'm just really grateful that we got to connect because this has been really insightful for me and just a really wonderful conversation. So my question is, so I became a citizen like 10 years ago, and I affiliated with the Republican Party, not really because I agreed or stood on everything on their platform, but because most of the principles that are important to me, I felt like they were trying to preserve. And in 2020, I unaffiliated. And I just recently, no. 2022, I unaffiliated. Recently, I just affiliated again. Here in Utah, we have over 500,000 unaffiliated voters. They're the second largest voting non-group, like in the whole state, right? More than the Democrats. There are more unaffiliates than Democrats. Republican unaffiliates, Democrats. So one of the dilemmas that I have been, I guess, studying or pondering on is how to suss out, how to differentiate the difference between the emotions and the actual values or principles, which may be going back to my nephew's question about, can you make political not so political? So my question is how do you discern the difference between emotions? Because I feel like emotions are being riled up intentionally.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you protect and preserve that? And especially when you're vetting candidates, or whether it's a candidate or if you're at city council or maybe you're at PTA.
Or if you're the one that's being vetted.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like how, because I feel like a lot of people aren't participating because they feel like that space, which to me is really sacred, is being attacked. Like no matter where you turn, it's going to be like, grab the heart, go for the emotions, you know.
Go for the jugular.
And how do you discern the difference between the emotion of like freedom or liberty and the spirit of freedom and liberty? Like what would be your message to all of those unaffiliates, and also just to anyone who's battling with, like, how do I know if you're telling me the truth?
Yeah. Great question. And I'm going to answer in a little bit of roundabout the way, and more so how I'm being vetted as a candidate. I was approached by a lot of people who are consultants and experts in the political realm. And I was told, create another social media. You need to create a second thing for just your candidacy. And I questioned why, and they had all these great, oh, the ads will be better. You can just do political and keep it separate, all these things. And it makes sense. And everyone does it. And I said, no, like,
Wow.
I want people to see me.
Yeah.
And this is a part of me. This is not something I just woke up and decided to do.
Mm-hmm.
This is not some fad or hobby. Like, if I lose, I'm not taking down the videos because that was a part of my life, right? Like, that's me. And so what I've done, and people may look at my social media, and I know people have, because people have asked me about it, and they're like, are you running still? Like, I don't see political, like, videos. Like, you're not talking on issues. You're not talking about the hot, like, topics, and you're not bringing it. And going back to your like both kind of your questions is, I want people to see me. And every day I'm not waking up and thinking about DEI or transgenders in bathrooms. I'm thinking about my family, my business, how my kids are like doing, providing like for my community, my church calling and our congregation. Like, that's who I am. The politician will always be secondary. And so when I post pictures about travel or post pictures about being at a young men's activity or my daughter's baptism, like, this is the real me, right? Like, and so I've shared probably more than I ever have in my life, but I want people to give them insight into who I am as a person, because then when it comes to a bill and I'm voting, they see me now as a father, a husband, a member of the church, a community member, a business owner. And it's not
anything different from this is my political life. This is no.
Yeah, and then also I didn't do it because of this, but it becomes harder to attack.
Yeah.
Because now they've seen me as a person, right? And I think I probably have gotten less attacks because I've welcomed people into my life in the most vulnerable parts of my life, and to see that, to get a glimpse into who I am. And so when people vote, they know what they're voting for. And so when you look on paper, me and my opponent and other people can write, we're pro-life, we're pro-Second Amendment. And then it's like, oh, who do I vote for? And they will know who I am. And if people reject me, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
They've used their democratic vote to say, I actually don't want Doug. I don't like him as a dad or a father, whatever. And I'm okay with it. I can sleep that night knowing that. But if I just ran as a politician and like said the right things, memorized lines, showed up picture perfect in a suit during podcasts and stuff, like, then I would probably question it if I lost. Like, maybe that face that I was showing wasn't the right face. And I never got into this for it to be something I'm climbing towards or reaching. I did it because this is who I am. I'd love to represent you, and I think I would do a good job with all of the experience that I've had. And you can take it or leave it, but I think I would do a really good job, and I hope you can support me. And so hopefully that goes back to your
Yeah,
question. And I
it
think
does.
your
That's
question about your son, I think I'm trying to do that, is
good. Yeah,
doing
because you're
less
not
of the
making about yeah,
politics, right?
exactly. Because I don't think our founders were like that either. They weren't all political. I get the sense that they were just about. I mean, George Washington being in his home, just doing his work, and then doing a political thing because he needed to. But yeah,
Yeah, hopefully that answers your question,
Yeah.
and just
Yeah.
thank you so
that
much.
it goes to that. And I truly believe that's the way it should be.
Yeah.
And I hope people start seeing a change in the political landscape
Yep.
by the way that we've run our
So
campaign.
where can people go to find you?
DougFiefia.com is where you can see our website. You can see our platform, the things that we're standing for. But again, those are just the highlights, right?
Mm.
Like, dive deeper, come talk to me. Like, would love to have a conversation like we have
So they
today.
can reach out to you on Insta or on
Instagram, my website, there's a form there that you can ask questions. You can, and I respond to
and
all
on
of them.
Facebook too.
Facebook, TikTok, you choose
You're
that.
on TikTok too.
I am, yeah.
Oh.
We it's the new generation, right?
It is a new generation.
And you see now candidates like Vivek has done a good job being
I
on
like
social media
him.
and doing
I
things.
like him.
I think he's good. I think love or hate Trump, but him and Vivek are changing the political landscape because they're not tied to a leash.
Yeah.
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 People
It
don't
makes a
pull.
difference.
Yeah, and
That
so
makes a huge difference.
you see the deep state
Yes.
going
Yes.
crazy because it's like, how do we
Yeah.
control them?
Yeah.
And they're like, you can't control me.
Yeah.
No.
And so
Well, and it's just so telling about how much control we have given away.
Yeah.
You know, so it makes sense that it would react that way.
And
Yeah.
also, I mean, like if it should inspire anyone to become business owners themselves, I mean, that is such a great platform.
Yeah. Well, and a
For sure.
great protest of liberty, really.
yeah,
Right.
giving it back to the people.
Yeah. Awesome. I'm excited for you, Doug. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
your time.
Thank you for having me. It was
Yeah.
a pleasure.